Warning, the following audio transmission is based on theory and is intended for entertainment purposes only. It's Doomsday and its affiliates will not be held liable for anything your dumbass does. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, everybody, to It's Doomsday Podcast. Today is Monday, March 23rd, 2026, and joining me is LP. What's going on?
Just another day.
Just another day. You know what kind of day it could be?
A great day. Could be
a great day.
Could be a fabulous day.
It could be. Or we could get hit with an EMP and life as we know it could cease to exist.
Well, I don't know. It wouldn't cease to exist. Well, I guess. Anyway.
That's what they would have you believe. But we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty of the EMP and what actually will happen and how to prepare for it.
Okay, go.
I'm excited. Okay, so first off, I think we should talk about what can cause an EMP. Now, the first thing I think everybody kind of goes to is the high altitude nuclear explosion detonation, where basically if another country would launch a nuclear intercontinental ballistic missile at us and we blast it out of the sky, you're going to have a high altitude detonation, which comes with an EMP.
Yep.
Or as some people would say, an HEMP.
There's a lot of people like hemp.
Hemp.
High altitude electronic pulse. Yes, a hemp.
Hemp. Hemp. Okay, so that's the one way, okay? And in all honesty, would probably be, I don't want to say the least likely of scenarios, but there are some where it's a little bit more likely of a scenario, such as solar storms and coronal mass injections, where there's basically an explosion on the sun, which is basically a gigantic solar flare, and that high charge, crazy plasma explosion that happens sends a wicked solar flare that screws up all the magnetics on Earth and just makes everything go to shit.
Mm-hmm.
Also known as CMEs.
Yep.
Okay. Now, there's also the potential of non-nuclear direct energy devices that can create an EMP, but those are a little bit, I think they're kind of, you can't pick one of these things up at the sporting goods store. So I don't think anybody's going to be using any of these anytime soon, right?
Yeah.
And then the most common natural type of EMP that you could potentially face is one that would come from a lightning strike. Now, let's get down to the nitty-gritty of this. Everybody has it in their minds that if an EMP went off, it's going to affect the entire planet. In fact, that's quite wrong. The best way to describe this is it's like throwing a rock into a pond. You get a ripple effect. Those ripples dissipate just like an EMP dissipates. And on the other side of the lake, they don't even know you threw a rock in.
Mm-hmm.
Does it make sense?
To an extent, yeah.
So proximity of how close you are to an EMP source signifies the amount of damage that electronics and other things are going to sustain, right? Now, that's one part of it. The secondary part of it is not every single thing out there is affected by an EMP. I see preppers doing a lot of stupid things that they really don't need to do. One of those things being storing regular double and AAA batteries in Faraday bags. These things are not, they are pretty impervious to the EMPs.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
The other thing is people like EMP proofing their homes. There's not, see, what you got to understand is like you can't EMP proof a glass window, right?
Okay.
So like if your refrigerator, if you have one of these new smart fridges and it's sitting right on the other side of this glass window in your kitchen, you're not going to put your fridge in a Faraday bag and you're not going to, put up aluminum foil over the windows. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other thing is there's really, and it's mainly because there's not much of a warning sign for any of these things.
Correct.
Like you could get All right. You could get a notification on your phone from emergency services saying, hey, there are intercontinental ballistic missiles on the way. Take shelter now. And at that point, the likelihood of an EMP has just went through the roof. So now maybe you do a couple of things, but you don't got much time.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
But there's a lot of things that are actually designed to actually handle the EMP, right? Because we know about lightning strikes and we know about solar flares and we know that these things happen and we know that these things damage electronics. And we are more electronically dependent than we ever were before. So therefore, some of these items are starting to become very hardened against certain things, mainly lightning, okay, and static discharges. Now, when manufacturers are building these electronics to be more stout, they're accidentally EMP proofing them along the way without realizing that they're really doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay, as long as I'm kind of making sense, that's what matters.
Kind of. I'm listening to you. I'm listening to you. I'm disagreeing with a few things, but I'm listening to you.
Okay, all right. Well, a couple things disagree. That's okay. But the fact of the matter is there are some electronics out there that are sensitive electronics that are pretty impervious to the EMPs. Okay, and a lot of them being the newer technologies like within your smartphones, things like that. Now, back in the day when you first got your first desktop computer that came into your home, or maybe your laptop you still have from like 2005, this has, dated weathered electronics and capacitors and everything's kind of shitty now, right?
Okay.
All right. So these items are going to be very susceptible to the EMPs, but also like a lot of it is kind of on this line of what are the long-term effects of this? Are they just going to shut down, turn off, and are they just going to power cycle and come back on? Or are they going to power cycle and go to shit? We had some pretty wicked lightning strikes around my house.
Uh-huh.
And these lightning strikes destroyed my outdoor security cameras. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly, and this it led me to think that there was a lot of magnetic discharge with this one particular lightning strike, because the first thing to go out on these cameras was the speakers. Speakers are magnetic.
Yeah.
Right. So all the microphones went out pretty much immediately. And then slowly the cameras went out, followed by our TV that's inside the home that sits on an exterior wall. It went to absolute shit. It no longer received the signal from a remote. So the remote control just would not work. We tried replacing it. We tried troubleshooting it. After those lightning strikes, just dead. So that IR beacon in that thing, or that IR receiver, I should say, fried, right?
Okay.
So also, shortly thereafter that, this TV would randomly come on by itself. So whatever sensor in there that thought it was reading the IR was toast. And it would randomly just turn itself on thinking it's getting a signal. Okay. Now, you think about these things that are capable of happening to these sensitive electronics with just a lightning strike, not something concentrated, not high altitude detonation. And it really makes you think, I guess, what could you live with and what could you live without? And what do you actually need to be protecting from the EMP versus what doesn't really matter? I got one more.
Okay, I'm listening.
Okay, all right. Then I'm gonna let you just blow all my theories to shit.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So there's a lot of people that also have it in their head that an EMP will be silent. And I think we've talked about this before on the show. They have it in their head that the EMP will be the silent happening. Like you'll just be sitting at home one day and everything will go dark and you won't know why. EMPs are going to be noisy. There's going to be a lot more going on than what you think would be going on. You're going to have breakers popping. You're going to have sparks flying. You're going to have TVs all of a sudden blasting the static fuzz. I mean, there's going to be a lot going on. Light bulbs exploding in your home. There's going to be a lot. Now, in regards to this, because things have become so lightning proof over the years, getting the grid back online isn't going to be this 10-year process that some people may have in their minds. Different grids are going to undergo different repairs and they'll be back online quicker than what you would think. Okay, now I'm done.
Well, I probably disagree with 80 to 90% of what you just said.
Oh my God, really? There's no way we're that far apart.
Yeah, there's a lot of science. I've got a little bit of a background in this, and I've done several videos on it that required a lot of research just to make sure I knew what I was talking about. And I'm far from a scientist. Excuse my cough. But There is a vast difference in the electricity from a lightning strike to the type of energy that is moving through the atmosphere. It has a lot to do with what they call the loosening of atoms. And it sounds really weird, right? You remember in the old days, matter of fact, up in the mountains, you probably still have a lot of these homes that have all of these like antennae sticking out of the top of the house that go to ground the house out.
Right. Yeah. There
You know
was
what I'm talking about?
Yeah, there's a name for them. I can't remember what they are, but everybody there's people that refer to them as like the Tesla ball or something.
Well,
I know what you're talking about.
They go directly to the ground. They ground the house is what they do. They don't ground the electrical system. They're not hooked to the electrical system at all. But the idea is that they would, if the lightning were to strike the house, it would hit these things first, and then it would travel down the path of least resistance to the ground, which was a stake in the ground that was like 6-7 feet long, made of, honestly, a lot of time it was either brass or copper. But that was the whole general idea. I don't know. There's no way for anybody to figure out whether it'll be, an EMP, like a traditional nuclear detonation type EMP, or if it'll be something from a coronal mass ejection. But both of those would act similarly, but actually quite differently. They would cause the same effects. But in one way, it would be. Okay, so there's three. It's difficult to explain because there's three phases to an EMP. Okay, they call them E1, E2, and E3. Now these things all happen within like 1 second. These phases of electricity, and that's what makes them so dangerous. Specifically, and it's actually one of the things that completely separates like a lightning strike from an EMP. Because the lightning isn't phased. It's like, hey, here's God's 12 gajillion bolts or 1.21 gigawatts. Bam, it's done. You know what I'm saying? That explosion, that crack in the air. With an EMP, either from a CME is mostly E3, but with a nuclear detonation, and I should back up a second and just kind of like be a little bit more clear, because people, especially with the war, quote fingers activated, people are kind of concerned about nuclear war, but with a nuclear detonation.
Pause real quick. You see that we put up the Doomsday plane, right?
Oh yeah, but that.
Anyway, okay, just saying, just saying.
That thing goes up all the damn time. Every time the Russians put one of theirs up, oh my God, the Doomsday plane's in the air. Yeah, the pilots have to land three times every month, take off and land 3 times every month to maintain their FAA certification. Anybody ever think about that? Anyway,
well, I just figured they had multiple pilots and multiple planes, and they just keep one up.
Anyway, yeah, I'm not a fan of that kind of stuff, but it is interesting. So, with a nuclear detonation specifically, this is going to release intense levels of gamma radiation. And these gamma rays, they actually interact with the air molecules in the upper atmosphere, roughly anywhere from 20 to 40 kilometers in height. But it really depends. It's called the Compton effect. And basically, they knock electrons loose from the atoms that are and then they send. I'm trying to remember. They send them hurtling downward in at an unbelievable speed, okay? Basically 90% of the speed of light. And then basically the Earth's magnetic field deflects these electrons, causing them to spiral and rotate, and, they become what they call coherent electromagnetic energy. Now, this is what actually creates the EMP, all right? And the process is a huge, it covers what they call a deposition ring, all right, in the stratosphere. And this produces a pulse that reaches the ground, obviously, that's below it, right?
Right.
And there's all sorts of variables: the size of the weapon, the altitude that it exploded. There's a lot of crazy things, but 3 main phases will always come out of an EMP from a nuclear explosion. And that first phase is what they call the fast pulse phase. Now, the fast pulse phase, this thing is going to hit within 5 nanoseconds of the actual explosion. All right. That's really stinking fast. All right. It decays. It's got a half-life, but none of that matters. All right. All you need to know is that basically it's going to hit on a broadband high frequency in the gigahertz range. And what it's going to do is it's because of the Compton effect, it's going to cascade down radiation, and the effects, it's going to basically induce massive voltage spikes. It's going to hit any conductor, any wire, any type of thing that could be even thought about as an antenna, and even the short ones, it's not going to matter. It's going to hit it. It's going to mess up circuit boards. It's going to mess up microchips, and it's going to mess with pretty much anything that's unprotected. Smartphones, vehicles, avionics, medical devices, digital controls, your air fryer. It's going to mess with all that stuff. Okay, whether it kills it doesn't mean it's going to kill it. Whether it kills it, it kind of doesn't matter, because then the E2 comes, and the E2 is going to come, and this is what they call the intermediate time pulse, right? And this thing hits at like 1 millisecond after the actual blast. So we've gone from a nanosecond to a millisecond. This is the actual, and it's funny too when we say this is the slower pulse, but it's not, because a millisecond is nothing compared to a nanosecond. Now, it's going to come in waveform, and its effects are going to be, it's going to surge like, this is the one thing that's closest to the energy of a lightning bolt and how a lightning bolt's electricity moves through the air. Okay. Standard lighting, any type of arresters or surge protectors, can often block the E2 phase. But the real danger is like in the synergy between E1 and E2, kind of like that left hook, right hook. You know what I'm saying? That combination. And that could actually destroy any type of protection that's down on there. You know what I'm saying? And it's going to cause secondary damage. It's going to weaken systems. And it's actually considered to be the most least threatening to hardened infrastructure. Okay. But then there's the big brother, the E3 phase. This is what they call the late time or slow pulse. The actual pulse that is measured, it's very, very slow. It kind of rises and falls over basically tens to hundreds of seconds, or even a minute. It's low frequency. It's normally kind of like quasi DC, but the field strengths are much weaker, basically like tens of volts per kilometer. But the duration is long. Now, how it works is actually, like that nuclear fireball and ionized plasma. It kind of briefly distorts the Earth's magnetic field. And it snaps back, and it induces a geomagnetic induced current similar to a solar coronal mass ejection. So you see what I'm saying? They're similar. The CMEs or an EMP, they're similar, but the phase 3 is the one that's very close to the CME. The CME is the quiet killer, if you were talking about noises. Now, the effects of this one are that these currents actually flow through long conductors only, like power lines or pipelines or railroads, undersea cables. And these things, this wave can span kilometers, like long ass areas, right? In the electric grid, it's going to cause transformers to their cores to become saturated. They're going to overheat. It's going to mess with the harmonics. It could possibly melt them down, or even cause a total failure of large high voltage transformers. And this is what's going to cause the widespread blackouts, that cascading failures, long-term damage requiring months, possibly years. To get around, because here's the thing, those big ass transformers, we don't make them. If we lose them, we can't just reach into our hip pocket and pull one out, and the way that EMP hits in those 3 phases is what does all the damage. Now, there are things that you can do to protect. Some people believe them, some people don't. We won't even talk about them here, but here's what I will tell you. Specifically with vehicles, if your vehicle is not running when an EMP hits, either from a CME or like an actual hemp, your vehicle's probably going to be okay. It's probably going to be okay. If your vehicle is running and you're driving down the road and one of these two things happens, you're probably going to have a bad day. So that's going to be my shtick on the damages and the phases and things that will take things out. And
so you basically said everything I just said, just in a different way, right?
Well, I'm smarter than you, and I make better chili, so it's going to happen.
Well, you know what? It's not about the chili, okay? Because that's not affected by an EMP. All right.
You don't know that. Anyway, you don't know that. I might actually make EMP chili that you don't know about.
EMP chili, sure. Laced with served in Mylar bowls, right?
Yes,
that's it. So, but back to what you were hinting at there toward the end, there's a lot of false information, like shit tons.
There's well, I won't say that. So here's what I'll say. I'll say that there is a lot of regurgitation of really bad YouTube videos by people who haven't done the research. That's what I'll say. I mean, it's not going to, the belief that it won't take everything out is very simplistic because there are so many variables. Was it the Tsar bomb? Was it exactly 200 kilometers above the Earth's surface? Did it actually take out 2/3 of America's electronics capabilities? Or was it localized when it was a stupid little 1 kiloton, dirty bomb that created just enough heat to cause a localized event? There's a lot of variables.
Well, there's also the idea too, if okay, so this is a big one, right? Because I've gotten into this one before, and it's really interesting when you look at things that are grid tied, right? So this is the primary example I could give to this, or talk about with this, is I think it's the best one I could give. So you mentioned in the beginning of this the houses with the lightning rods, stuff like that.
Okay,
we started getting away from that whenever we started utilizing piping within our home for grounding, right?
Yeah.
Especially further north. Like a lot of people, and I don't know, and I had somebody bring this up to me the other day and I wanted to smack them, but they started grounding the homes to the water lines because the water lines are all metal and they were going so far into the ground and running away from the home and connecting to the mains. It was a great ground. It was a great source. Right. I had a guy recently tell me, he's like, you got to make sure you ground all your electronics in your house to your pipes. And I said, they're PEX. Yeah, but you should still ground them. I'm like, but we use PEX now.
Yeah.
Well, water's a conductor. Yes, inside the PEX, that's the insulator. So I think that was maybe some of the reason they started getting away from that was the idea of indoor plumbing, the idea that things could be grounded through the plumbing now. But I mean, that still doesn't replace your 6-foot ground rods outside the house. Right. Anyway, but to get into what I was saying about being like grid tied versus not being grid tied. So say that, and this is a totally hypothetical scenario.
I love them. Go ahead.
Okay. You have a hospital. There's a bad storm. The hospital is running on emergency backup power and is cut off currently from the grid by the main breaker for the hospital, right? Well, if an EMP hits and drastically affects the grid 50 miles, 60 miles away, okay, and is sending which waves were these that you said are going down the grid? Was it the which segment of this was it?
That'd be E3.
Okay, so the E3 would be stopped because the circuit would be opened. There's no closed circuit, so therefore it wouldn't make it to the hospital, to the sensitive equipment. So just a hypothetical of, some things that could survive certain scenarios, right? And that would be like the perfect hypothetical. Crazy storms happening, EMP goes off, hits this grid 50 miles away. This hospital just so happened to be running on backup power, so all their stuff is still good. All right?
Yeah. Because there's only so much strength that it has. You know what I'm saying?
Right. And we had even talked about, the idea would, emergency services vehicles be up and running because a lot of these are plugged into shore power, right? And we got into this and we're like, well, they're consistently on shore power. All right. However, from the grid to that emergency services vehicle, there's like 8 breakers in the way, right?
Okay.
You've got your big main, and then there's another one in there that drops over to emergency backup power, and then there's the individual breaker panel on the building that is, where there's the own little 20 amp breaker for that device, and then it finally makes its way to the emergency services vehicle that has an auto eject that as soon as it senses a reverse signal, it ejects, and then all the breakers inside of that vehicle. So the idea was, if we had a vehicle plugged up to shore power, could this actually make it through the grid and damage one of these vehicles?
Mm-hmm.
And our short conclusion we came up with was no, it shouldn't. There's fail safes in the way, and a lot of them. But again, that doesn't mean it couldn't. That doesn't mean it wouldn't. This is just a hypothesis. That's it.
Yeah, it really has a lot to do with your location to the actual EMP.
So my crappy stone in the pond theory. We're going back to that.
No. Well, a lot of people forget. So if I'm tracking with you, it's basically there's so many things that are going to get automatically turned off in the way it'll never get to the vehicle. In
theory, yes.
Yeah. Well, with an EMP, the electronic waves are everywhere. They're not just traveling down one line. They're everywhere. They're anything and everything that could be seen as an antenna, like a metal frame of a car, an antenna, a wire, anything.
So basically anything that can conduct electricity.
Yep. Anything electricity can travel down the path of, correct.
Something that would be very fun to research would be how EMPs would affect hydropower generation.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting because, water is a conductor.
Yeah.
And, typically these hydropower generators are on large, large bodies of water.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not familiar with the math on that one, to be honest with you. That's something that I've never actually contemplated.
Well, neither am I, and I'm not going to pretend like I'm familiar with it.
It's smart, man. It's like, on this particular subject, I'm dumb.
On this particular subject, I know a whole lot of nothing. Anyway, but the whole point of the episode was just to say that it is better to do your own research. And a lot of the things you're seeing out there online are quite, in fact, bullshit.
Go find my video. It explains it even more.
Does it? Where could we find your video?
Cal was here and on YouTube, all one word. And then just type in EMP.
EMP.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's about all we got for today. We'll be back next week with another exciting episode of It's Doomsday Podcast.
This is an emergency action message. At approximately 1 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, NORAD is tracking 15 ICBM nuclear missiles inbound to the following cities: Orlando, Miami, Pittsburgh, Dover, Newark, Richland, Philadelphia, New York City, Baltimore, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Boston, Seattle, Detroit. This is an extremely deadly situation. Stay tuned. The next emergency message will be a presidential address.